When you think about the most dangerous man in MMA, who comes to mind? Perhaps one of the current UFC champions from any weight division, or maybe one of the all-time pound-for-pound greats. While all these fighters are dangerous in their own regard, outside the octagon, there's an individual who's even worse. His name is Ramzan Kadyrov. Let's find out why. Before we start, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. Located in the North Caucasus of Eastern Europe lies Chechnya, which is a small republic in southwestern Russia. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Chechnya attempted to gain independence from Russia, which resulted in 2 brutal wars, and Russia needed someone to keep the peace in Chechnya. That someone was Ramzan Kadyrov, who was a former leader of a militia and became the head of the Chechen Republic in 2007. During his rule, he slowly became more entrenched in combat sports than many fight fans might understand or wish to believe. For instance, it's quite common to see Kadyrov rubbing shoulders with athletes that I'm sure you're all well aware of, and hosting major fighting events. On the surface, it seems as though he's just a big fan of MMA, but there's also a deeper, underlying reason why he's always in the spotlight, because it actually helps him maintain his stronghold over Chechnya and distract the world from some of the heinous crimes committed by his regime. Saying that Ramzan Kadyrov is a controversial figure would be a major understatement, as he's been directly linked to several cases of torture and murder. In 2006, Human Rights Watch published a briefing paper on torture in Chechnya that was being carried out by soldiers who were under the effective command of Kadyrov. The victims were usually journalists, human rights activists, and political opponents who would randomly happen to disappear or end up being assassinated if their views were against Kadyrov's. A number of witnesses have even reported the existence of a murder list which contains over 300 targets. It's also alleged that Kadyrov has supported the extrajudicial killings of homosexual men after many had randomly been arrested, detained and tortured, and in some cases killed as part of a region-wide program. Kadyrov denied such claims by the media, but in an interview with HBO's Real Sports, he would state that this is nonsense. We don't have any gays, and if there are any, take them to Canada. So, while it's clear as day that Kadyrov is a rather contentious figure, why is he so dangerous within the realm of MMA? Well, Kadyrov's influence in MMA is probably bigger than you think. In fact, it's massive. The heavy influx of MMA events in the Chechen Republic began in 2013, mainly after Kadyrov started showing interest in the sport. He would then later take ownership of the Akhmat MMA Fight Club, which consists of several training facilities throughout Chechnya and frequently hosts tournaments for fighters in Russia and the Caucasus region. He also owns ACA, which is one of the leading MMA promotions in Europe. Both these organizations are sponsored by Kadyrov through his government budget. Now, there's no denying that the Akhmat Fight Club is responsible for producing and or supporting some of the most established and best up-and-coming fighters in the world. Kadyrov believes in his fighters so much that he's even proposed the best fighters from Akhmat Fight Club take on the best UFC fighters in a fight to the death, with no judges and no stoppages. Now, these type of ideas from Kadyrov aren't really surprising, because in 2016, he sparked an outcry after hosting and televising an exhibition fight between underage children who didn't have any form of protective gear. All the children were under the age of 12, with the youngest being only 8. This, of course, was a clear breach of conduct and triggered a wave of critics, especially from the Russian MMA legend Fedor Emelianenko, whose comments made national headlines. A few months later, Emelianenko's 16-year-old daughter was then randomly attacked while on her way home from school after a stranger approached her in the street and assaulted her. She would then later be sent to hospital. Now, while no direct connection was ever made to Kadyrov or his people, Kadyrov would later thereafter say that he believed Emelianenko had, quote, realized his mistake. So, this scenario just shows you the lengths that Kadyrov is willing to go to protect his image. Overall, Ramzan Kadyrov has successfully managed to build a mixed martial arts empire across Chechnya by creating gyms and facilities, associating himself with some of the biggest names in combat sports while producing his own Chechen fighters, and overall propelling the idea that MMA is part of Chechen manhood. Consequently, one could argue that Kadyrov has actually used MMA as a political weapon to help secure his power, influence and authority over his citizens, a tactic referred to as sports washing, as he's presented himself as a kind-hearted, sports-loving leader instead of a dictator who oppresses certain groups of his society. In fact, the US recently imposed a number of sanctions on Kadyrov under the Magnitsky Act, which was made in 2012 that placed visa bans and asset freezes on a number of Russian officials linked to human rights abuses. Further sanctions were added in July 2020 by Mike Pompeo's State Department, which banned Kadyrov, his wife, and his 2 daughters from traveling to the US. Kadyrov actually responded to these sanctions with a photo on Instagram, which he captioned, "Pompeo, we accept the fight. Things will get even more interesting." Despite all the above, the UFC continues to ignore any questions regarding their ongoing relationship with Kadyrov. In fact, they've even welcomed him in the past to their first show in Moscow back in 2018, and continues to sign fighters affiliated with him. Let me know what you think about Ramzan Kadyrov in the comment section. Anyway, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. Cheers.